I've been playing outdoors since I was a kid, standing by the front door at around 2 years old, hollering, side, 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 trying to get my mom to let me go play outside. Now, after 30 plus years working in the outdoor business, I'm dropping insider conversations every week with the brand leaders, guides, marketers, CEOs, and others that make the outdoor industry a trillion-dollar juggernaut that drives product innovation, revenue, and public policy for everything outdoors. I'm Rick Sayes. Welcome to the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 452 of the Outdoor Biz Podcast, brought to you this week by Alabama Beaches. Be sure to visit alabamabeaches.com and search their calendar of events to find the best local happenings and activities, as well as a place to stay. Beautiful white sand beaches, outdoor adventures, the nation's best recreational trail, and unique attractions make Alabama Beaches the perfect destination for your next vacation. Go to alabamabeaches.com and get your Alabama Beaches adventure planned today. Today, my longtime outdoor compadre Kenji Haroutunian makes his third appearance on the show. As longtime director of 2 top 50 trade shows in the country and many events and services beyond, Kenji's experience has afforded him a truly independent viewpoint to best understand the ebbs and flows of business trends, successes and failures, and the tools that can be applied these days to make a difference. Welcome to the show, Kenji.
Rick, thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I should say welcome back to the show. I was just looking it up. This is your third appearance.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess I forgot it was 3 times.
Yeah, no, it's, well, you're not the first to 3, I don't think, but we talked way back when I was first starting out, episode 19. I think that's the one we did in the OR upstairs. Remember the audio wasn't that great? Remember that?
Super noisy. Yeah. You had that handheld Zoom unit. I remember.
Yeah, that one. And then we did another one with you and the Big Gear Show, your Big Gear Show team. It's you and Sutton, and I think who else was on? Somebody else was on that.
Maybe Lance, huh?
Lance, I think it was. Yep. That was a good one. So yeah, welcome, number 3.
Well, thanks again for having me, man. You are the shining example of perseverance in mission, stick to mission.
It's been super fun. I didn't anticipate this when I started, I can tell you, but I think you're going to be episode 440 something. So that's come a long way.
That's good for you, man. Amazing.
Yeah. Thanks. It's been so much fun. I say that all the time. I didn't anticipate that, but it's just such a great conversation like we're about to have. So,
yeah, well, it's the benefit of our chronologic advanced status is that we've seen a lot, and I've seen like your arc grow over that whole time, and all the movements you've had to make and adjustments and learnings and investment into your platform. So, kudos to you, man. And I think that is hopefully something, we'll talk about is the benefit of having this kind of perspective on an industry that's continuing to change and move and in all the different ways it's doing it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you get into doing it, I think it's been 8 years now. I think you really don't realize as you're doing it day to day, but then you look back over the body of work and things have evolved. So it's interesting how the industry has evolved. The world of podcasting has evolved, all those things. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
So for some of the new folks that are listening, let's do a little background on Kenji. What was your first job in the outdoor industry?
My first job in the business was working in the sales floor at Adventure 16, which was a store chain, a small specialty chain down in Southern California, headquartered in San Diego. And I worked at the West LA store with a few luminaries like John Monnier and great Greg, now I'm forgetting his name, but Connie Self and Jeff Sheets and a bunch of cats some of which you've had on this show before.
Yeah, a bunch of yeah. And then you made the pivot to trade shows. I don't quite remember how that happened. Remind me how that happened.
Yeah, that was interesting. So I had been managing stores, a store manager for Adventure 16 in LA and then in the Valley store. And was back in the LA store managing there, and then got a call from Larry Harrison, who was put on task by the outdoor retailer team to go find their next account exec. There was a long-time account executive who was leaving, and they were looking to fill that spot. And I said, well, what's an account executive? It's not a term I was familiar with, and it sounded pretty fancy, but I, long story short, interviewed down in Laguna Beach with the team. And then, back then it was called Miller Freeman was the owner of the outdoor retailer shows.
That's right.
And I got hired there as a salesperson, having zero experience selling space or advertising, and starting in earnest in my career in the media/shows business.
And you were with OR for a long time and then pivoted to the Big Gear Show. Some of our listeners might not be familiar with that one yet. Give us an overview of the Big Gear Show.
Yeah, so with my experience in outdoor retailer and being in a high profile role, I had a lot of exposure and a large network of connections to brands, retailers, rep organizations from around the country. I had left OR in 2015 and started my own consultancy. I'd worked for organizations like Grassroots and different organizations across the spectrum on their event strategy and event management, as well as doing some diversity and inclusion work, mostly pro bono on that until more recently. And then Big Gear rose up out of what was the Paddle Sports Retailer Show. So that was a show launched by a couple of guys from the paddle sports industry who became sort of unhappy with the timing of outdoor retailer, where paddle sports was a big part of the outdoor retailer show in the past, and they took their boat and went off and started their own show.
Right.
And so out of that came the desire to be more inclusive categorically. So instead of just paddle sports, why don't we bring in hike and run and camp and bike even, and create a more comprehensive and more inclusive platform? And so that's where the Big Gear Show came from. It launched in 2020, right into the heart of the pandemic. And so, of course, we didn't stage that first year. Nothing staged in 2020 after March. Mm-hmm. So 2021, we staged a limited version of it with masks and full COVID protocols. Even though we were an outdoor show, we were out in Deer Valley, out on the parking lots there.
Yeah, I remember that. Was that the first one that I went to? Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, the design was to be more experiential, like give people the chance to paddle a boat or to go ride a mountain bike or to hike a trail with this backpack on or this footwear, and really put the products to the test, which was what we did, even in the old days of outdoor retailer at the demos. But certainly the show inside the convention center would not facilitate that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So that was the core offering in 2021. And then we went again in 22 with a little more comfort around gatherings. People were becoming a little less nervous as COVID started to...
And flying to gatherings?
Yes, flying and being in groups and breathing each other's air and all that. So yeah, I think that route, what was established in 21 and 22, in 2023, we staged the Big Gear Show in concert with the E-Revolution show, which was our e-bike show that stemmed from the first Big Gear shows. And we did it indoors at the convention center in Denver. They happened to have the dates available. And so we were able to jump on that. But what we learned is that this isn't really built to be a convention center show. There's a whole industry of the trade show industry that's built around convention centers and meeting spaces. And they have a very well-oiled and established infrastructure that was just not the right fit for us financially, as well as experientially, like, coming out, bringing your pop-up tent, bringing some demo products, and then not having a place to actually put them to use is kind of not a good fit for us. So in 24 this year, we staged outdoors again in concert with the Outside Festival, which was a big event taking place between the Capitol building and the county seat building in this big park in downtown Denver. So that was the just finished Big Gear Show number 4, I guess.
Cool. And what's the response to that? Seems pretty good so far from what I hear.
Yeah, it was a first time event in that we partnered with a big festival, which drew tens of thousands of people. And we kept our B2B to C format. So we had a B2B day Friday, and it was decently attended, but not like a crowded space. We had retailers in the mix. We had some working media folks there, guides and outfitters from in Colorado, but also well outside. We had buyers coming from Louisiana and St. Louis and other parts of Colorado that are not the Front Range. And then, interestingly, CNN came. as one of the media entities. I guess they're nosy about what's going on in the outdoor biz. And
I should have Anderson Cooper on the show, maybe.
sure. Yes, who knows? Maybe he's a closet outdoorist, right?
You never know.
Yeah, so I think it was really successful because it was kind of flipped the whole show example on its head. Like, historically, the last day of a trade show is kind of a throwaway day, and it's the day, that you sell off your stuff, or you wait for the closing bell to ring, and it's
right.
The big joke in the show industry. I think I probably said this in the previous recording was, if you had a 1-day trade show, that last half of the day would be dead. So there's always that last day is dead thing. In our show with big gear plus the outside festival, we started quietly on Friday, and then it blew up into like thousands of people cruising and dealing with consumers interested to learn about products, interested to buy products, and with the ability to do that, really supercharged the event and ended on the biggest day was Sunday. So we ended with a bang instead of a whimper. So that's very different than sort of, the trade show
exactly last
sort of experience.
Worthless. Yeah. So you had consumers and buyers. Were they there at the same time? Or did you separate them?
No, we had a separate day for industry connectivity so that there could be time and a relatively quiet environment for conversations and getting to know people who are key contacts, buyers, media makers, et cetera. And then we pivoted into consumer mindedness. So the brands all knew that this was what was going to happen. And so they were prepped to make that pivot and be able to talk with consumers who are just interested to learn, or they're interested to buy, or they're in the market for an e-bike or a stove or a backpack or a tent. And having that opportunity, including some paddle sports brands too, which were stand-up boards and fishing vessels and even overland.
Oh, wow,
so
cool.
even some motorized products.
And consumers could actually buy right there. Were brands making the sale, or how did that happen?
Yes. Brands were making the sale, although we had Orvis, a few other retailers in the space, which were all, they only exhibited during the consumer days because they weren't really there to sell to wholesale or meet with media.
Right. So we were talking before we hit the record button about the industry and the changes. We've been doing this a long time now. What are some of your thoughts on how the industry has evolved over the years?
Well, it's such a disrupted time here after the pandemic, and there's still the waves of disruption that are working its way through the industry. So, but if I step back, I've been doing this outdoor industry thing since my first days at A16. That's 37 or 8 years ago. I've really seen a couple of key trends I would speak to. And one is the evolution into being a real industry. Like we actually have relationships with policymakers, and we have measurements and statistics on the strength of the economic impact we have. Like that's what real industries do. I think when you and I started in the 80s, that wasn't really happening,
Well, I laughed because, those trade shows were all a bunch of guides and, us young kids that worked the retail shop floors and stuff. It was not as sophisticated then as it is now today. You're right.
No, that evolution is big. And I think, the infusion of capital market representatives, it was very different. You're right. During my time, for example, at the helm of the show is during the time when financial investors started showing up in numbers, dozens, and then like hundreds of people were coming. And we even created an event for them called, what was that called? Fund Source.
Oh, I remember.
And it was specifically designed for new brands to pitch to investment community people and get valuable feedback and maybe even score an investor, in the sort of mode of Shark Tank, right? But it was,
yeah.
I think Camber Outdoors was kind of helping to sponsor it. And, we got people like Beaver and all that were in the mix, helping to advise these young companies. And it was due to the fact that we had, as an industry, drawn now the financial community. And that certainly continues to be the case as brands are acquired, as consolidation happens, even as brand new ideas and new, more diverse brands are coming to the market. So that's the other trend I see, Frick, is like you could come into the show and feel a certain sameness, I'll just say, amongst the senior leadership and the brand ownership and the board of directors of all the organizations in the industry.
Mm-hmm.
What you see now is a transformation taking place. It's slow, but many more brands on the industry are led by women. Many are founded by BIPOC founders. Many are changing their board of directors to include a more diverse set of people, experientially, ethnically, gender-wise, and age-wise. So that is another change that's, I think, still early days for us, but becoming a more inclusive industry across all of the different segments and job types, I think, is something that is in motion right now.
Yeah, I think it's gotten more diverse from top to bottom. I mean, everything is, there's more variety of all of it, from people to shops to products to, buyers and sellers. And it's just, I think that's pretty cool. I think it's, it shows maybe a bit of maturity, but it's also a bit of, variety and opportunity. And that's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah, and it is good for the industry. I've never had a job working for a single brand.
Right.
I've never been a rep working for just a few brands. I have only had jobs that sort of aggregate hundreds of brands together, or maybe thousands, in my work with the shows. And so I only really personally benefit if the whole industry grows. It doesn't help me if, Marmot takes market share from Sierra Designs or something like that. That's a zero to me.
Right.
So
it's good for the whole industry.
Yeah. More participation, more inclusion, more welcoming at the trailhead, more welcoming at the put-in, more welcoming at the ranger station, and more welcoming in the business.
Yeah, at the retail floor. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of trade show options these days for outdoor and adventure businesses. Do you have any thoughts on how that shakes out, consolidates, continues to expand? What do you think in the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, interestingly, I shy away from the word trade show anymore because it's kind of a loaded term. It kind of almost by default says the old way or the old show model that for the outdoor industry anyway has become passé. And I think that whatever we're going to call the new show model, at Big Gear, we call it, B2B2C, or just simply like an inclusive platform that makes less of a deal of your categorical status. Interestingly, I have I don't have my badge on right now, but I came in the show and they had sort of parsed the show entry timing by what kind of badge you had. So it was like, you get in at 8 if you have this badge, you get in at 11 if you have this badge, and you're not allowed in if you don't have this badge. So I think that determination of who occupies what is really difficult now because, who is a retailer anymore? Who is a guide, outfitter, influencer, media, etc.? Even supplier brands have brand, like they have products with their brand name on it. Gore, for example. So it's a fuzzier world when you make those determinations. So creating a more inclusive show experience is, I think, part of the future equation that'll make sense and will help to, in concert with several other things that need to happen, create that magnetic pull that'll pull all the segments together again and create that vibrant epicenter that is, in Connor Hall's words, the South by Southwest of the outdoors.
Yeah. Well, and back in the day, everybody didn't do everything, right? I mean, I remember when it was a big deal for brands all of a sudden to start selling direct. You thought we were like, and then, ruin the world. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. You're what? Because it was very striated, if you will. Brands sold to retailers sold to consumers. And now that's all completely blown up. Everybody's selling.
Blown up. Yeah. That's what I mean is.
It's a great thing.
Right. It's disruptive though. And so to the old model of trade shows, it's disruptive. To the old model of wholesale, it's disruptive. And, what has happened, and this might go back to sort of, another industry trend, is that the consumer has a ton more power. They have much more insight into not just the facts and figures about a product or about a company, but also what are the reviews? What are other people saying about this product? And who can when I say what I say about this product, who's going to be paying attention? In a sense, every consumer is a bit of a media person. They're a bit of an influencer.
Right.
They're a bit of
Right.
a gear reviewer, right? And
Right.
some people have thousands of followers, but they don't work in the industry.
Mhm.
They're just a hiker or a backpacker or a frontline person
Podcaster.
who, yeah, well, right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's what they do, but they do have big influence and they have all the information. And, I remember running retail stores, and my staff was charged with knowing as much about all of our products as well as what else was out there so they could
Right.
steer people to the right solution based on what we were carrying. So if they came in asking for Columbia, but we had Helly Hansen, let's talk about Helly Hansen, but you got to know the Columbia product too. And that has changed radically where, customers come in all the time. I spend a fair amount of time in retail stores still, even though in Southern California, we have a bit of an empty hole there for specialty shops. But, it customers have a lot of info right at their fingertips, and they'll pull their phone out right when they're talking to you and say,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, this one says, and then they'll say, well, this price says, and there you are, as a salesperson, representing your entire brand of retail saying, well, yes, but, or yes, and, or,
Yeah. Yeah.
Ideally you'd be able to say, yes, here it is.
Yeah.
But not always the case. So that is a earth-shaking change in the industry, is that the consumer has wields so much power. And I think that has to manifest itself in the show experience as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of these things have become events, right? They're now combination conference, retail, learning experiences. I just got back from the Venture Travel Trade Association Elevate event in Asheville. They didn't have a retail component, but they had all the other things. I've been to the Outdoor Writers Association conferences a couple of times now, and they've got learning components. There's no retail component, but at some point I guess the Big Gear Show is also more like an event because you have a bunch of other activities and the retail component.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So when you say B to B to C, B2B is kind of the old trade show model where it's a limited invitational type of experience. And then you pivot to this inclusive, everybody's welcome experience. And so that addresses that consumer power aspect and the consumer influence. And that includes buying gear at retail or whatever the offer is on the table from the retailers, from the brands themselves, going direct to consumer. And even from the old days, I remember a list of 100 reasons why someone would exhibit at a trade show. And those 100 reasons still exist now. I talked to a guy today. It's like, well, he wasn't really here to open business with retailers yet. He was just there to get a feel for the industry, learn from retail buyers from different regions, talk to media people about, well, what are the sorts of things that you want to report on? And, he's doing his homework. And sometimes getting good intel costs money. In fact, I would say always.
All the time. It costs money. Intel.
Right. Whether you're doing surveys or whether you are yes, you can scale from a smaller size now, which is true. You can use social media advertising to just pop your brand out and go direct to consumer. And then at some point be big enough to afford to be present for retailers and then get more media and, grow your brand logically that way. But still, you're not going to get away with, starting a band for free. That's going to be powered by smart intelligence and meaning, from the right people that are the people that would buy your product or are the people that would carry you in their store.
So let's go back to the Big Gear Show. Can you share any highlights or standout moments from the recent show?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think partly just being next to a big festival where there's this celebration, there's art, music, and film, and it's just a different experience. And being outdoors under the sun, with great weather like that is just a really different experience than our typical trade show of yore. Some of the highlights, were there was a big trail run that with over 100 people launched kind of early in the morning.
Cool.
The North Face has this thing called the Tread Tour, which they launched from the Big Gear Show, and they have new footwear to bring to market. So it was a really great event to just kick off one of the days of the show.
Mm-hmm.
We had a titanium chef competition, which is a idea I've been cooking, no pun intended, up in my head for years. I think you and I probably talked about this 10 years ago. Like, what if we had like cookware companies, like duke it out in an Iron Chef competition?
Master Chef. Yeah, right.
So we did that finally.
Cool.
Such is my madness, and it went really well, and we got some good good fun times and capture on it. People were fascinated at the different cooking options. We had a pellet stove against a propane powered stove, and we made the company leaders use each other's gear. Like that was a surprise element.
Right.
Of course, we had surprise ingredients too.
Right.
All managed by Steven Starks, who's this great chef out of the Denver area, and really a fun guy to work with. So those two things, I think the fact that we had good representation from the motorized world, we had paddle sports there, and a complement of e-bikes, even though it was smaller e-bike story than in 2023, we had a lot of the right brands there that were bringing like very high quality, very reliable e-bike products to the market, because there's been just a bunch of fly-by-night companies on the e-bike side that kind of wanted to get in, quick and get out, and they got out because
they got out quick.
Yeah, it's the regulatory hammer is about to drop, and there are all these fires, battery fires, and even
I haven't heard
deaths.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, back in New York, I think is kind of where it was happening the most, just in the past year or two, and so they're trying to make a stricter determination of like, well, what's a safe and UL listed, safety inspected e-bike product look like, and then what are the different categories of e-bike and what can you expect? So being able to come to a show and get on a number of different e-bikes and ride them on a test track that's not in traffic, that's not with pedestrians crossing and kids in strollers and dogs on leashes. Like there's all these things that happen if you're just going to go to a bike shop and test an e-bike. Well, you're going to roll right out onto the street unless they've got a parking lot that's empty for you to kind of cruise around on. And that's just
you cut out
outdoor, on a path where you can really learn to use the bike without worrying about I'm going to get hit by a car or I'm going to run into some kid.
Right.
So that was a great experience. I think speaking to the experiential, Scarpa was there doing trail run demos of their new product. So we had a short course there for running just to demo the shoes. Let's see. Yeah. So tons of really great activations, I guess I would say, at the show in the camping, in the cooking, in the e-bike space and the trail running space, and up in the overland, I guess we'll call it, space. Orvis was there doing casting demos with their new.
They had the new 4-wheel camper thing there. I heard about that.
Yep. Yeah. And they have a new Helios line of rods that they were unveiling there, and they're a retailer in Denver too. So there we go. Is Orvis a retailer? Is Orvis a brand? Is Orvis a experiential provider? Are they a 4-wheel drive overland company? Yes, all of the above.
All the above, exactly. Yeah. What do you think attendees can expect that might be different next year? It's more of the same, but have you thought of anything to add or change or?
Oh yeah, no, we've had one debrief with Outside. I think the program in partnership with Outside is a place where we can do a lot more. Now that we know kind of what it feels and looks like, we can do a lot more communication, and some of the things we didn't know, like they weren't letting backpacks into the festival. So that made it hard for people who bought products to go over to the festival and go in because, I have this pack full of gear, or it's a backpack I just bought, they didn't, so we could provide a pack valet, a place for you to stash your stuff until until you're leaving, and then you can come by and pick it up. That's an relatively easy solution. Just an example of one of the ways we could improve for next year. I think, making sure that we actively promote the retailer, guide, outfitter, and media attendance out in advance. I think that's an opportunity for us to drive even more B2B value on that day before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, get some more podcasters there. There are probably a lot of podcasters there.
A couple, yeah, there was some.
Forget what I was doing. I couldn't make it. I don't know what I was doing though. But
yeah, I think at first you were able
I was
to, and
planning on
then something
going. And
happened.
something happened. Yeah, yeah. I don't
Mhm.
remember what it was. Do you see the brands evolving, or other products that you missed that you're going to bring to the show next year?
Well, yeah, I think, my view on the brands is the brands who benefit the most from a show experience like this are newer and up and coming, or maybe small to medium sized brands.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're the ones that don't have video production facilities and showrooms all around the country and $1 million marketing budget.
Bunch of
So they're
reps.
at a
Yeah.
disadvantage. They're at a lots of reps. They're at a disadvantage in all those ways, except in the live face-to-face setting. That's where they shine, because now you can really get to know, because you're often meeting the founder or the chief, designer, like the main people that run the brand. And so it's a great way to come to market and fast track your penetration, I guess I'd call it. So that's going to continue to be the case. I think bigger, more established brands will come in as they feel either like there's a new aspect of their story they want to tell, or they're they see a threat. They see, oh, okay, well, this company is coming up. They're at the show, we're not. And so, the fear, greed, and envy part of it kind of rolls in. So
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. What do you think are a couple of the biggest, we talked about this before we hit the record button, about the state of the outdoor industry today. What do you think are a couple of the biggest challenges facing the outdoor industry today?
I think there's a lot of challenges. I think losing our neighborhood shops, in the cities primarily. I think shops and touch points at the trailhead and near the put in and at the destinations, that's still relatively strong across the country. What I see is that the urban shops are really getting crushed. Like their costs are going up, their inventory and open to buy situations are super stressed, and they're just finding it hard to keep going. It's also a time of changeover. Like a lot of the shops like A16 that were founded, in the 60s and 70s, those company owners are either looking to sell or turn over. The younger generation may or may not be interested in running retail stores.
Right.
And so they're finding this time of changeover is very active. And that's true in other, related sectors like fly fishing and surf and others. But I think that's part of the challenge. Right now, we're still working through the inventory glut that happened from the disruption of the pandemic. So first, people sold everything they had, and then they had nothing to sell. And then the product was getting delayed because factories were closed. And then the shipping lanes were delayed because they couldn't have enough dock workers to even unload the ships. And so that just created this big lag time in the industry that we're still working through. Like that created this over inventory situation that we're still in right now. There's too many bikes and too many boats and too many tents and too much footwear. And so just to, at the same time that the demand curve has gone down, or at least normalized after the pandemic, the waves of that disruption are still happening. And that's probably still the biggest thing that's affecting almost every business day to day. Like it's just, everyone is looking forward to the time when we get back to sort of a normal demand curve and, a product flow that we can predict.
Yeah, because that impacts the brand and the retailer, everybody. I mean, even the consumer, right? I already have 6 of those. I don't need another one. Not
Well,
6. I'm being
that's
facetious.
what happened is, it's like they already bought a lot of their sort of durable hard goods during the early years of the pandemic. Right. And then now, the demand for that stuff is flattened. But I've heard glimpses, like accessories is already on the upswing. Footwear is back on the upswing. Apparel didn't really experience the same explosion of growth because a lot of that is sort of more, at once or, point of purchase, like, oh yeah, I do need a new jacket or sweater or whatever. But the investment pieces, the hard goods core items that get people outdoors, which is a lot of what powers the big gear show, as well as, the market in participation, like those are still sort of on their way back. But you can see this future coming, that the accessories have already started to pick up. And then with that, we'll normalize the hard goods, apparel, and footwear.
That's good to hear, because I've always thought lately that we were making too much stuff, but I didn't attribute it to leftover COVID times issues, because I think, making too much stuff is kind of the antithesis of the outdoor space, right? We're always about, environment and sustainability, and we're going to get to sustainability in a minute, but if we're making too much stuff, that makes all that other stuff go out the window. There's too much stuff.
Right. Yeah. No, you're right. And I think that's a very real situation. And I think what also is a trend for the future that we're already seeing happen now is what I would kind of categorize as re-commerce. So taking old products or products that need repair and then keeping them out of the landfill, like finding a way to repurpose them or, fix them and put them back to market, or just selling used gear hasn't been a hallmark of the outdoor industry until relatively recently. Right.
Right.
And so like Dave's shop up in Bishop, the gear exchange, or
I've taken a lot of stuff there.
Yeah. And that, he's kind of more out on the front of that, but that's happening in all kinds of different ways and with different organizations like Articles in Common and Out and Back Adventures, which was part of the Big Gear Show and Outside Festival. So that's an emerging situation for sure, is how do we keep stuff out of the landfill, and not making as much stuff is part of the solution.
Right. I went to take a pair of boots into Dave's shop recently, and he says, "We're not taking boots or day packs right now. We're full." And I was like, "Whoa, what?" That was kind of surprising. But yeah, he had too much stuff. So
this is part of that sustainability thing, is like we all put stuff in the blue bin, right?
Right. Yeah.
But how much of that actually gets recycled is kind of a mystery number.
Right.
And it all has to do with what Dave pointed out, which is, well, the price of aluminum is worth recycling. So we're going to definitely be psyched about that stuff. But this other plastic or this newspaper, like, yeah, we'll recycle it, but it never really actually gets recycled. Right. I think that's part of our future too, is like transparency around where things come from and where things go.
Where they end up. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So how is sustainability reflected at the Big Gear Show? What are some of the initiatives you guys have?
Well, I think on the brands and the product side, you could definitely feel it. A lot of a presence and interest in that re-commerce story. For us as a show producer, shows are horribly wasteful historically. So trying to minimize the flow of that, because we have such a small team, I was managing a lot of that myself. What was happening over on the Outside Festival side, we really wanted to participate in, but we weren't able to do it this year. But they had a composting aspect too. So they really activated a zero waste program.
Oh, great.
That did a pretty good job, but it's pretty expensive because you've got to have staff that are there saying, oh, wait, that's not a composting thing. You got to put that over here. Yeah, put
the sorters.
This in the
They got to
compost.
sort it all out, put in the right spot.
And this is, it's sort of pre-sorting. So they had staff at each of these 10 stations or however many there were.
Wow.
And so that's expensive because you just got to pay people for all the time that they're there. But very, very impressive commitment from outside and their partners on the festival side of things. We want to implement that, in the future years of this show. And so we've been paying close attention to like the flow of trash, trashable things coming in. We had a space that we dedicated just for cardboard that could be reused, storing it so that it was kept dry and viable. And then, the companies that needed them at the end of the show, we had it for them. So just reusing and being smarter about, everything from badge holders, which we didn't have, no badge holders, just printed on enough, quality paper that it's going to stay in place,
right?
And have a badge holder design that is effective. And we only had that for the B2B day. You didn't need badges or anything to come in with. We had digital waivers, so again, just not piles of paper that you have to keep for years. We used a digital service for that. So, little by little, getting smarter as a event producer and bringing those bringing those solutions to bear at the show.
Mm-hmm. What are a couple of the brands or products you think are leading the way in sustainability? Or are there any at the moment? I'm sure there are. Obviously,
Oh, yeah.
Patagonia's
Oh,
there.
yeah. I think, I guess, this small brand, Stream to Sea, they're called. They're making a product that doesn't, like, it's a sunscreen product, skincare product, I guess you'd say. But even the packaging on it is thoughtfully designed so that it's biodegradable, over time, not in your backpack, of course, but, and they have a system for being able to return that, empty or recycle it. So just, little thoughtful things like that I thought were prevalent around the show. I think some of the different stove options, I think one of the big stories coming out of the stove and cooking side is single-use propane, those green, ubiquitous 1 pound propane bottles.
Right.
Like we had none of those in the mix. And sort of the new solution is to have refillable propane.
Great.
Which was there. Some of the other solutions like big bottle propane that's refillable that you exchange over at the gas station. And then we had a pellet stove coming from timber stoves that was an interesting alternative to burning wood out of the forest. So let's see. I think those are some of the great thoughts or great concepts coming out of the exhibitor base. Let's see what else from the sustainability side of things. There was quite a bit, actually, especially in one of the highlights of the show was the Founders Market, which was produced by Path Ahead Ventures, REI's program for lifting up BIPOC and women-founded organizations.
Cool.
And a lot of those companies are really, really carefully curated to bring like really thoughtful, more sustainable solutions to the market, as well as better solutions for groups that historically haven't been addressed, whether that's different body shapes or just disabled folks. But that's different than, in a way, it's different than sustainability. In a way, it is sustainable.
But it's the same, yeah. In a way, it's the same, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
With all the talk lately of PFAS and things just that we're discovering that are maybe worse off than we thought. How do you think, or do you think we can do more or maybe do some of it faster? Because it seems like maybe just, old guys like us, we're running out of time. But I think about my niece and nephew and the world we're going to leave them. And, some of these things, we've got to implement these programs like last week. And it seems like it takes a lot of energy and thought and conversation and things to get everybody's head around it to implement. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm pretty active in California with the California Outdoor Recreation Partnership that I helped found back in 2018 in addressing these aspects because, the way that the legislation first came out was basically saying at retail, there can't be PFAS in any of the products you sell after January 1st, 2025 or whatever the date was.
Right.
And is like, hey, hold on a second. We as the industry believe in eliminating PFAS, just like we believed in taking out BPA, just like we believe in using post-consumer recycled ingredients, just like we believe in circular economy solutions. However, starting with the retail side is starting with the tail of the horse instead of the front.
Right.
Like you've got to start at the supply chain side, get them to stop using it, and then you can regulatorily, if that's a word, regulation-wise, regulation-wise, you can, move down the chain. So you start at the fiber manufacturer, then you go to the fabric manufacturer, then you go to the apparel manufacturer, then you go to the wholesaler, then you go to the retailer, and then you go to the consumer and give them a way to get rid of that stuff or to cycle it in a way that doesn't end up with just plastic in the ocean or in the landfill.
Yeah.
So I think
more plastic in the ocean or the landfill.
This is the reason why business and government partnerships, are really so important to how we move forward, whether it is keeping PFAS out of our bodies and out of our ecosystems, or doing a better job of working with tribes and taking that native knowledge and that stewardship mindedness of thousands of years of indigenous presence and honoring that. Like all of these things mean disrupting the current flow. And that's hard. If a river is flowing super fast, it's pretty hard to get it to move in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're changing the culture. We're changing the entire culture of an industry. Like changing our own personal culture is hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it for your family or your community is super hard and takes longer. Doing it for an entire industry that has all these moving parts across the country and across the globe, like that's going to take years. So I think part of this is just learning to keep. I had a coach when I paddled outrigger, and he had this phrase, we would use, because outrigger races are sometimes really long, like 20 miles, 30 miles.
Yeah.
And it's just smooth power. Like keep the pressure on, keep applying the pressure. Don't burn yourself out because you've got an hour and a half more to keep paddling. Don't burn yourself out, but smooth power, and keep the rhythm, keep the power going. That's what we need. We need rhythm, and we need gentle applied power that's consistent. Kind of like you and your podcast.
Yeah, I was thinking the bike portion of a triathlon.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I don't even mess with the triathlon.
Hey, do you have a life bird list? I do. When you plan your adventure to visit Alabama's beaches, you'll find plenty of locations to add to that life list. Bird lovers consider the Alabama Coast Birding Trail a bucket list destination due to the many species that pass through the site. Hummingbirds, herons, and snowy plovers are just a few of the birds you'll see. Go to alabamabeaches.com and get your Alabama Beaches adventure plan today. That's alabamabeaches.com. Now let's get back to the show. So where do you see the big gear show in the next 3 to 5 years, say? What's that evolution look like?
Well, I think we have to keep adapting and building this new model. And I think that the future of it is going to be more events kind of surrounding the main event. So I guess I think of it as like a constellation of stars or something. Like we've created the critical mass in the center, and now we're just, you mentioned ATT Elevate. Like I know Shannon's thinking about maybe that belongs in orbit with the Outside Festival and this CEO Summit idea. And I participated in an Asian Outdoor Leaders Group meeting. Little things that start to build around the core. People bring their sales meetings to town. That's always happened back at the old show, right?
Right.
Those are the things that create the critical mass and get people to say, you know what, I really need to be there. And the more you do that across more sectors, across more job functions, and the workforce part of the industry, the more that'll bring the industry to bear and create that critical mass. So I think that's the future, is continuing to work partnerships. I think partnerships are what fuel that type of, critical mass building.
Collaboration. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that that's super important. And I think that's something that I personally, and I think Big Gear is well positioned to continue to do. I think refining our partnership with Outside and that, that festival plus components, I think that is not a no-brainer. It's going to take some brains, but now we know, we have a lot of knowledge out of the gate here. We have a lot of data. And so we can adjust and refine to really satisfy and create real value for industry participants across a wide job description base. And then also with consumers who, as discussed earlier, has so much power with shaping brands, with sharing opinions and gear reviews and other ways to represent.
Yeah, you always learn so much from the first event or the first sales meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah. That's great to get
well,
that
and
under
we've
your
learned
belt.
something each time. But honestly, like this model, we really started last year without a partner like Outside. And this year, it really was a game-changing aspect.
Yeah, that's what I meant, the first one with Outside. Yeah, because you guys had it pretty dialed in for the Big Gear show, but now that you partnered with Outside, it's another level up. So good on you. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, it just makes sense. I think for us, we are not, let's face it, we're not experts in audience development, in the public realm, using billboards and social media and TV and radio. podcasts, to
Right.
fuel consumer participation. Like that's not where our brain trust is. We're all people from the outdoor industry, and we're doing an event for the outdoor industry. And we know the different aspects of the industry, which are quite varied. Like, I'm talking about it as if it's one thing, but and I know that outdoor industry isn't one thing. It's, 17 industry segments that come together and play in the same sandbox and have like-minded attitudes about conservation and about how we work with public lands and all that. So there's it's not a singular monolithic thing. And so that's always been the challenge of shows is how do you be all things to all people? And the answer is you can't.
Right. No, you can't. You don't want to be either. Yeah. Yeah.
No,
you got to pick a couple lanes and ride them hard.
That's right. The secret to success, I think, is focused.
Yeah.
And maybe not my singular focus, but, focus on the things, the collective set of relatively few things that can really drive value and bring this different model to life. So we are to some degree together with outside building a plane while we're flying it, right? Like nobody's said, here's the blueprint for doing a new model of show. We're building it and we're learning as we go. And we have to continue to be open-minded, adaptable, and pretty flexible in what the industry's needs are, because no doubt they're going to keep changing.
Mm. Any thoughts on those changes for the industry in the future, next 3 to 5 years? Retail, wholesale?
Well, I think
guiding, the whole outfitting thing is a whole nother segment that.
Yeah, I think, the experience providers are going to be really important, and we've somewhat not ignored them, but downplayed their role. Guides, and not just guides and outfitters, but clubs and affinity groups and organizations like Native Women's Wilderness or, Latino Outdoors that have chapters all over the country, leading trips, introducing people and helping them feel comfortable with their community, in the outdoors, at the trailhead, on the water, in camp, with a backpack, on skis, whatever it is. That movement is really important to the future of our industry, and we have to keep funding it. We have to double down on that. In fact, that is the future for our industry. I have no question about it.
I would support that 100%. Okay, I'm going to go to the hardest questions I ask moving forward. First one is.
I thought those were the hardest questions.
Those don't seem to be. These last 3 or 4 seem to be the hardest questions I ask all the time. At least it causes people to take some time to think about. Like the first one is, what is your favorite piece of outdoor gear under $100?
Oh, well,
is it still the same all these years?
Let me check with my AI. It'll tell me how I feel about this. No.
Well, you've bought this 67 times over the last 10 years. So
yes. Well, true. I think last time I said headlamps, and I still think headlamps are amazing. In fact, one of the ones I saw yesterday was a voice activated headlamp, which is brilliant,
wow.
Dude. Think about that. Like, my mom is blind. She does not know how to operate a headlamp mechanism, and they're notoriously squirrely, right? Like, it's not just a flip switch, because you need that top part to be kind of waterproof.
Yeah.
And so it's always a little tricky. Like, okay, how do I get it to? And then it's a little complicated. Well, if you do it 3 times, then it comes out red. And if you do it twice, then it blinks. And then if you do it 6 times, you reset the. It's just.
And 9 times out of 10, you need a headlamp because your hands are busy.
That's right. Exactly. So it's a brilliant solution. And I just saw that, yesterday was this voice activated headlamp.
I love it.
Like, of course it makes sense. Like Alexa meet headlamp.
Right.
And
love
then
that.
come together.
Yeah.
So headlamps are still one of my favorite categories. I think there's still lots of innovation opportunities. I think that place, in fact, where technology, yes, even AI, combining with sort of our tried and true products that help us get outdoors, whether that's a paddleboard or a backpack or tents, like there is integration of technology into these products that help them be better producing, lighter weight, more safety relevant, I guess I might say. So, but let's see, I think, what are my other favorite piece of gear lately?
Yeah, you got anything like on the biking or the
climbing side, biking side? Well, biking side, I did get a new, to me, bike, and it's all carbon, and it's amazing. Like, it's a game changer.
Yeah.
And I bought it used and, paid a reasonable, amount for it. But man, that's a game changer for just riding in the urban environment, which is where I live.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still learning a lot about bikes, and, it's still a steep learning curve. On the climbing side, I've been kind of shamed into getting new gear because I have such an old rack. It literally, people point at it and they're like, "What is that?" Well, that's a tri-cam, you see. And, oh, what's that? Well, that's a slung hex. Why would you use that?
So if Alan Pietrasano is listening, he's probably thinking maybe somebody has a rack older than mine.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, Alan.
Yeah. So it's just being shamed into getting more modern, climbing gear. So I've got the latest generation, a few of the latest Camelots that are out. And young people now, they just put cams in everywhere they can. Like, and to me, like, cams are on the list, but they are not.
Right.
They don't belong everywhere.
Right.
If I can get a good nut placement, like, that's 10 times better than a cam placement to me. But so I'm still learning about latest and greatest gear, but I would say, like, lighter weight slings and better connection options in the climbing realm. I'll just put it as a general category, because they're using lighter materials like Dyneema. And so they last a lot longer. They're lighter weight. They run more easily through the carabiners. I think, what else in my climbing kit have I really appreciated? Yeah, I think that's about
good.
it.
We got a couple. We got a couple. That's good.
Yeah, I'll go with that.
What is there a memorable outdoor adventure or experience that has influenced your work side of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of my bigger adventures was skiing the high route across the Sierra from Independence to Fresno, basically.
Yeah.
And in that experience, because I was with Jeff Cooper and Alvera and Sineva Sorby, it was pretty well documented. So I have images from that, and I can tell the story. And it's a story that's relevant to people that want to ski the high route, but it's also a story that's relevant to a number of different objectives, or just inspiration for businesses who are facing challenges as a team, or challenges as a marketplace dynamic. And it's even helpful for our journalists and people. Like, I used that story. It was included in Jeanette Stosky's recent book called The Outdoor Leader. So I have an excerpt in there from this trip that I did,
Cool.
And that I learned so much about not just, how to backcountry ski a multi-day, like, big objective kind of thing, but also about leadership, about following, when the right time is to be following, and leading when you're needed to be leading. And it reminds me of kind of this, the dynamic in leadership. Like, you don't always have to be the big bad boss. There's times to hand over the boss reins to your up and coming leader, or identifying who are your up and coming leaders and investing in them. And then when the time comes, they have the skills and they have the ability to go out and go for it and take the reins. And I learned a lot about that during this trip, where I was not the trip leader, but I had to become the leader for at least a ways.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, I think that's one of many. Of course, a lifetime of climbing and being in situations or conditions, or both, that required just keeping a level head, not panicking, even though every bone in my body saying, "You better get down from here, and you better do it quick." Whether that's a lightning storm or rockfall or avalanche, or tons of different, facing these objectives and learning how to have a cool head is so important to operating effectively as part of a business team, or a family leader, or an effective partner in a relationship. It crosses through a lot of my life.
That's well said. Yeah. Do you have any advice for anyone looking to break into the outdoor industry? Yeah,
it's a little different than it would have been last time we talked, because I do get asked that question, as you do probably, if I had a nickel kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I think that there's a couple ways. My standard answer is for people who have, been asking me this question for decades. I say, well, best way, start at retail, learn the retail ropes, go with the front lines, talk to people who are just getting into it or need a new piece of gear or need some advice about where to go, what to do. And you'll learn where the pressure points are, where the pain points are, where the opportunities are, where the products are. And so I still say that. However, there is this other track that's actually a viable thing now. Then back in our day, I think not so much, And
it was retail. Exactly. That was kind of the only way to get in. Yeah.
Right. And, having a mentor, someone like a Connie Self or a John Monnier or, a Dieter Trimp to help me understand kind of the path I was getting into and avoid some of the pitfalls. Like, I think that's still important, but it's hard. Not everyone can have a mentor, right?
Right. Right.
There's more people interested than there are mentors to serve them. So there are other avenues now. A couple of I mentioned earlier, like the REI Path Ahead Ventures or the Founded Outdoors companies. So for people that are down the road with an idea, maybe they've started a brand or they've started a service company, that a guiding organization or something that they're just at the beginning of. There are resources in Founded Outdoors, in the Path Ahead Ventures program, where you can actually have help with your start, not just financial help, logistical help and guidance, so that you do avoid some of those early pitfalls that crush so many companies before they're even companies. I think that the other thing is academia. Academia has historically not really been a thing for us, right?
Right.
I remember when I first hired a guy at A16 and he had graduated from the Prescott University outdoor program, which was the only one I knew of in the whole country, an outdoor industry
early on, I think
program.
it was the only one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, lots of schools have outdoor programs where they'll teach you how to sail or teach you how to climb or something. But the industry part of it, like how is the industry structured? How do I get in? What are the skills I need, et cetera? Like, there's now multiple MBA programs, University of Denver, Western Colorado University, Prescott, the University of Utah State. There are all these different programs now that are out there, and I think more online, to help people kind of train up to be able to come into the industry with the skills needed to, not just earn your way up from retail, but have a role to play with companies, with outfitters, with media, and even government relations and HR and all the different programs that, bigger companies need.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when I got my master's in outdoor rec from BYU, it was only BYU and Indiana University that had master's programs for outdoor rec back then.
You have a master's program for outdoor rec?
I did. Yeah. I got a master's degree in outdoor rec.
Oh, man. Well, that wasn't the beginning of your career, because that probably became a thing relatively recently, right?
Recently. That was right out of undergrad.
Well, you're only, 40?
Yeah, right. No, I wish I was 40. I don't feel 40.
Yeah, you're more like 30 for the second time, right?
That's it. Yeah, a little over that, but yeah, you got that right. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of it's fun to see all those universities and other places where you can get various recreation, specifically outdoor recreation degrees now. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then you can walk in with sort of an established track record that says, I'm dedicated to this industry. I'm dedicated to working in it. And you don't have to prove it by, but with the only avenue of joining a retail store and getting paid only a little. But also, I have to say, man, some of our old friends, some of I've mentioned in this podcast already, they're working back in retail. Like,
really
40 years later, they've come around and they're back in the retail thing. And
interesting.
I find that fascinating. Yeah, it's just so neat that I think it is valuable. And in my heart of hearts, I do see myself like having a retail store in my older years and, helping people find places to go and get the right gear. And I love that. That process is really fulfilling to me.
Yeah. It was fun. Those were fun days. We had a good time.
Yeah.
So these days, who or what inspires you in your work in the industry or the big gear show? You have a mentor or someone that you just have always.
I have interestingly developed what I would call co-mentors, and these are people that are much younger than me. They're generation younger. People like Yoon Kim and Yvonne Liao and Ronald Grisman and this guy Ronald Mead or Ron Mead. Like these are they kind of could be my kids, but
yeah.
they consider me a mentor because I have this experience to share and like this overview approach to the industry that helps them kind of navigate. But I also consider them mentors for me. Like, what are how does the algorithm work? When it comes to LinkedIn's, whatever, product, why is it referring this? And why am I suddenly seeing something different in Facebook than I used to see? And this whole digital landscape that you and I are, frankly, immigrants to, they are native to.
Right.
Like, they're born into this. They just naturally, easily flow through.
They've had a phone in their fingers since day one, practically. Yeah.
Yeah. And operating, TikTok algorithms or, tools like Buffer and all that. They've got that stuff wired, and it's super helpful to me to learn from them about that. So I think, people like Yoon and Ron, and there's quite a few that I could name that are really inspiring leaders. And then there's people like Jose Gonzalez, who I just find to be so brilliant. I find that things he says like bounce around in my head. They don't just pop in one ear and out the other. Like there's this one thing that he says that I'll share here. And I don't even know if he made it up. It's just, he shared it with me, and it's just like, damn, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
And it is that, and this is relevant to our whole industry conversation, is that relationships move at the speed of trust. And so, like, how do you gain trust? And, this is an interesting thing. Like, you and I have known each other a very long time. We trust each other in the front country, in the back country, on podcasts where I'm not going to say something like demeaning or stupid. Like, it's just like these unspoken trusts that happen from knowing someone in person for a long time.
Right.
And, I trust that you're not going to like put my voice out on this weird, and manipulate it to be,
or
saying
ask us
something
some
I didn't.
Wild question, some, very inflammatory question.
Right. That's, put me on my heels. Like, I think that idea that in our industry, like ours is a relationships industry, like nobody should be in this industry if they think they're going to transact and make $1 million and become the next Elon Musk. Like, this isn't the industry for you. You should find a different industry, like technology or high fashion or consumer electronics or energy or something that's a much higher reward, high risk type of environment. Like this, being in this industry means you are not going to be fantastically wealthy, and if you're fortunate, you're going to find a good living. And I think that I feel very fortunate that I have been able to, have a home for my family and raise my kids and just do the basics. I mean, both my cars are, 260,000 miles or more. And I don't know how I'm going to get the next one, but, it's been a privilege and a joy to be able to have this career arc that I've had, that I didn't know when I was a kid was a thing. We all knew that astronauts are a thing, and police are a thing, and firemen are a thing, and being a teacher is a thing, and being an engineer is a thing. But working in this thing called the outdoor industry and developing a career, like, who knows how that works? I think, I just fumbled forward. Luckily, I didn't fall in any, hole that I'm still trying to climb out of.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe that's happening next year. But
that's been one of the fun things, though, I think, for the time that we started and have grown up and grown with the outdoor industry, was it all evolved together. Us and the industry kind of grew up together. We were building the plane as we flew it, so to speak. And I think that's been, really, really fun. I mean, I guess there was still outdoor things that were happening before, obviously, but it wasn't coalesced into an industry, so to speak. And
that's fun. True. I would put when did it become an industry answer? I don't know, like somewhere in the 80s, mid-80s, late 80s.
Right.
And you start to look at what makes an industry. Well, having a industry association and having retail landscape, is one of my rules. If someone's asking me, is is paddle sports an industry, or is fly fishing an industry, or is climbing an industry? People ask me that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have said no 10 years ago.
Hmm.
Climbing is not an industry. Climbing is part of the outdoor industry, but it doesn't stand alone. It stands in close proximity to and connected to this pursuit of the outdoors, that would maybe be couched in adventuring or mountaineering or something. But climbing is an activity. However, guess what? There's 700 plus gyms in the U.S. now that are rock gyms.
Now, right? Yeah. How many brands are there? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that fuels a bunch of new people going into the outdoors, looking to get climbing, and they need to get outfitted. They need the skills. They need the gear. And so now I would say it is an industry. So I think that aspect changes. So we have to continue to adapt. And, I think that welcoming more people in while not having a detrimental impact on the resource, like that's the trick. Like that is the future for our industry. And whether that's re-commerce or continuing to work to protect and steward more public lands, like those are both big challenges for our industry and are not a slam dunk. If we don't manage it right, we're going to put more people in the outdoors. It's going to have more damage and more problems, and we're going to get shut down.
That's a very real situation. I think it's a bigger issue for the planet, right? I mean, we're now, continuing to repopulate, overpopulate, however you want to state that. And at some point, there's a finite number. We've all known there's a finite number. And every other species things, once it gets, I think there was a game back we played at Palomar Mountain School teaching kids about the carrying capacity and all that stuff. At some point, it's going to be too much. And as we get older and everything gets bigger and more, we're going to have to figure out at what point do we have to stop doing some of this stuff or slow it down or something. But there's a bunch of smart people. We're pulling back. We're coming up with new ways to power our vehicles and, all those things. So I
think having an industry voice that's connected to the conservation movement is a really important and somewhat unique opportunity. I think that, in the case of energy companies, for example, they try to do it. Like Chevron says, hey, we have a, green fuel program that is focused on whatever, hydrogen or solar or whatever. But, I think that's a difficult sell. They're on a slow boat change because they have so much money bought into the current infrastructure.
Right.
So, they want to be in control of the mechanisms of change. And so they bought their way into that. And I think that we as the outdoor industry are more, we're more of the people. We're smaller companies for the most part, many smaller companies that have a chance to make a difference when it comes to how our lands are managed, how they're protected, how access is increased and created, and therefore control the impact. But that requires a lot of education and a lot of boots on the ground participation, which is why local organizations are so important. Right. Groups like, Friends of Joshua Tree and the Allied Climbers of San Diego and Bishop Climbers Alliance and, the different chapters of Latino Outdoors and the Winter Wildlands Alliance and all of the dozens of groups that you and I both know. Right. It's going to take boots on the ground to affect a lot of these changes. You can't just do it from DC. You can't just do it from, OIA headquarters.
Right. Keep on keeping on. So what's the best way that people can follow up with you and the Big Gear Show?
Well, they can simply go to thebiggearshow.com and take a look at our team and reach out to me through that. If you click contact, it's coming to me. So, among our massive team, I'm one of the person that gets it. And you can also, find more out at kenjiconsults.com, which is my personal website, my business. Or you can just Google Kenji Outdoor Industry. And by the way, there's two of us now. So really? There's this guy, Kenji, I think his last name is Takahashi. And he made a film this year about Ashima Shiraishi, who's a pro climber. And he did a movie about her and it screened at the Outside Festival.
Oh, cool.
So now you might get his name, but you're probably still going to get my name.
Yep, cool. Well, we'll link to all that stuff in the show notes for sure.
Cool.
Well, it's been great talking to you. Thanks for coming on again. And I look forward to seeing you over here on the East Side at some point coming up.
Yeah, sometime very soon, Rick. I am jonesing for some Sierra time.
Get over here before the heat comes, or get over here and get high. Get to 14,000 feet quickly. You'll be all right.
That's the ticket. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, right on.
All right,
well, thanks, man.
Thank you. Good chatting with you.
Hey, before we wrap, I've got a special message for you. I know some of you have a podcast rolling around your brain, or already have a podcast you'd like to polish up a bit. I'm excited to announce that I'm partnering with Tracy DeFord's, Stephanie Euler, and the Produce Your Podcast team to get it out of your head and into your followers' ears. Tracy and her team have helped me grow and monetize my show, and podcasters trust them because they deliver. Go to ricksays.com/PYP to get all the details. Let's get your show created, produced, and on the air today. Go to ricksays.com/PYP and get all the deets, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Outdoor Biz Podcast. Be sure to visit our website, theoutdoorbizpodcast.com, where you'll find show notes with links to everything we talked about and more. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And while you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or spread the word and tell a friend. That would really help us out too. Be sure to tune in every week. And thanks again for listening to the Outdoor Biz Podcast with Rick Says.